The Mike Wagner Show is powered by Sonic Web Studios.
Hi, this is Mia Mosinzia, also known as Mia No Time for Love. Check out my latest book, Missing, available in print and ebook formats on Amazon.
It's now time for the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios and sponsored by international award-winning author Mia Mosinzia of Missing. The Mike Wagner Show can be heard on over 40 podcast platforms, as well as HamiltonRadio.net, Diamonds FM, and the MikeWagnerShow.com. We can be heard in over 100 countries, featuring over 1,000 well-known and amazing guests throughout the globe. And named one of the top 100 global podcasts in the New York Weekly Times, Hollywood Entertainment News, Los Angeles Weekly Times, Apple, and Chartable. So sit back and relax and enjoy another great episode of the award-winning Mike Wagner Show.
Hey everybody, it's Mike from the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. Look at a professional website without breaking your budget. Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs that blow the competition away. Call today, 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show, get 20% off your first project. Sonic Web Studios, take your image to the next level. Also, time to give an official shout out to our official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Mosinzia. If you love fast-paced mysteries, you'll love Missing by Mia Mosinzia, available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing is fast-paced and intriguing with an unforgettable twist. Takes place in 4 countries, 2 strangers, 1 target, where truth is illusion and those you love be the first go missing. It's available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing by Mia Mosinzia has garnered great reviews, and Eve11 enjoys by Howard celebrities, including Joanna Cassidy, Forrest Riley, and many others. So grab your copy today for it goes Missing by Mia Mosinzia, available on Amazon. Also, check out the Mike Wagner Show at themikewagnershow.com and over 40 podcast platforms, heard in over 100 countries, including Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Also, Anchor FM, iTunes, Google Play, Amazon, Audible, Apple Music. Also on HamiltonRadio.net, Diamonds FM, Oldies Radio, and a few other networks coming soon. Take the Mike Wagner Show with you on any mobile device. Subscribe to the Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. Follow the Mike Wagner Show on Instagram and Twitter today. And for great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com and check out the Mike Wagner Show podcast with t-shirts, pop sockets, hoodies, also tote bags, pillows, and more. Go to Amazon.com and check out the Mike Wagner Show podcast. And for more great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com/Mia Mosinzia for great books like Missing, Once, and Wrinkles. Also t-shirts, pop sockets, hoodies, phone cases, and more. Amazon.com/Mia Mosinzia. Also support the Mike Wagner Show on Anchor FM, PayPal, and the MikeWagnerShow.com. Make sure you give generously today. We're here with a terrific gentleman who's a retired engineer and manager in the aerospace industry. He was born of 7 of 8 children on a farm in Oklahoma. Left the farm at 17 to work in commercial jobs, paying his own way through 2 college degrees. His vast work experiences from labor to engineering manager stretches from Texas to North Dakota and from Massachusetts to Arkansas, contribute to his current novel, which is called Tares Among the Wheat, which is volume 1. And, of course, the book reimagines the tales of his relatives' experiences during the late 19th, early 20th centuries from the perspective of the South Great Plains, including World War I, the influenza of 1918, the oil boom and bust, the Roaring Twenties, Prohibition, Dirty 30s, the Dust Bowl, and, of course, he's got a lot of great stories as well, too, and also an upcoming book, which is called Death in Tomorrow's Shadows, which will pretty much just goes further into detail as well. And live, ladies and gentlemen, from the Plush Studios somewhere in beautiful Oklahoma, the multi-talented author of the book, Tares Among the Wheat, Volume 1, and upcoming Death in Tomorrow's Shadows. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Melvin James. Mel, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, good evening to you, and thank you, Mike, for having me.
Well, it's great to have you on board as well, too. And you've got a really interesting history. Mel, I got to say that you're a retired engineer and manager in the aerospace industry. You're born of 7 of 8 children on a farm in Oklahoma. You left at 17 to work in commercial jobs, paying your own way through 2 college degrees. Your work experiences go from labor to engineering major, going from Texas to North Dakota, from Massachusetts to Arkansas, which contributes to your novel Tares Among the Wheat, Volume 1. And, of course, your book just reimagines the tales of your relatives' experience during the late 19th through early 20th centuries from the perspective of the Southern Great Plains, from World War I, the influenza of 1918, the oil booms, the oil bust, the Roaring 20s, Dirty 30s, Prohibition, Dust Bowl, and more. And, of course, the upcoming Death in Tomorrow's Shadows, which pretty much just, goes into the further detail. And before getting to all that, Mel, tell us how you first got started.
Well, I was in engineering college, and I had to take one of those electives, and I happened to take English literature to fill that elective requirement as an engineer. They didn't want engineers to be all math and science, and the professor of the English literature class told me then, I was a junior in engineering, that I should be into literature. He especially liked the way I wrote, but I had to tell him that I'd spent too much time and effort in engineering to change majors as a junior in college. So I went on through engineering, completed that, went into industry in electronics and computers, decided they were trying to make too much of a technocrat out of me, just at a desk, software programming all day. So I went back to college, got a second degree in business, went back into the aerospace industry and worked my way up to management. So I had a career that took me a lot of places. I worked on Air Force One. I worked on the Boeing 747 Doomsday airplane and some other airplanes, foreign head of state aircraft, reconnaissance aircraft, and so forth. But I retired from all of that just a few years ago, and when I retired, I wondered about if I really could write, so I spent my spare time writing this novel, using as what my professor had told me, write what you know about. And I knew about my relatives, my ancestors. All 4 of my grandparents took part in the Oklahoma Land Run, the famous Cherokee Strip Land Run that was the basis for the movie Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, Far and Away.
Okay.
So all 4 of my grandparents were there, and they were mixed heritage. My grandfather on my mother's side was Czech. My mother's mother was a Irish woman, full-blooded Irish. So my mother was the daughter of a Czech and a full-blooded Irish woman. My father, his parents were German and Dutch.
Huh, interesting.
So I was born out of that mix of different heritages of all pioneers. And when we would get together, all the families were large. The grandparents would tell stories going back as far as they could remember into the middle of the 19th century. Mm-hmm. Some of them were superstitious. They had their own odd ways of looking at things. So I remembered all those, and I thought, well, I'm just going to write that colorful history, all of those types of superstitions and the habits of those people and what they went through, their trials and their efforts. So I used history as the background. It's not a historical novel. It's what I call a classic literary fiction novel. And it's an epic 2-volume novel. Both volumes have the same title, Tares Among the Wheat, Volume 1 and 2. Collectively, it's longer in words than Gone with the Wind. Mm-hmm. But fear not, it's not as many words as War and Peace. Mm-hmm. But it is an epic novel. It took a lot of words, and that was even after I'd kept the words back again and again, as my editor kept forcing me to do. Still, it was a large book because it had just a lot of story to it. It's got stories within stories, frame stories. And I've included a lot of that ethnic background. It begins with an Irish family in Ireland about 1875. They come to New York City, where most Irish came through Ellis Island. In New York City, the father worked as a carpenter. The son had to quit school at 6th grade when his father was injured, and he went on to become a wagon driver, a wagoneer, they called him back then, hauling freight. And he marries a girl from Kentucky when he's working there, and they move on from there to Oklahoma just after the land run. Wow. And so they have one son, and the son grows up and meets and marries a German immigrant's daughter, who was a wheat farmer and a dairy farmer. And he works his way up to heading a large ranch, a cattle ranch. Before the oil boom is really discovered about 1920, and he discovers oil on the ranch that he inherits, and becomes a big tycoon in the oil industry. But all of that is lost later. Then the story picks up again because he and his wife, the son who marries the German immigrant's daughter, they have a child, but they give the child up for adoption. Mm-hmm. So there's a detective that finds the long lost daughter who is deceased in St. Louis, but her daughter is still alive. So they find the granddaughter of the couple and bring her just in time for the grandfather's funeral. Mm-hmm. So she inherits what's left of the estate, which isn't much. But there are a number of trials and tribulations. The story is much about people's ability to overcome obstacles, to be persistent, to be durable, and continue to work towards a good future for themselves as well as their children. So I think the story, I like to think it's got a lot of encouragement in it, that sort of thing for people. There's a lot of faith and hope in it. It's not a terribly religious story, not in the least, but it is one that I think has inspiration to it. Mm-hmm. One critic said it was a combination, the way he looked at it, of The Great Gatsby and the other book, There Will Be Blood. I'd have to disagree with that. I think it's more like the combination of the movie Far and Away, which was not a novel, and the movie HUD and the movie Giant. All of those elements are there. The big things of Oklahoma was oil, wheat, cattle. The Dust Bowl, Oklahoma was in the heart of the Dust Bowl. And all of those are in the background. Of course, Oklahoma, like everyone else in the United States, went through the Great Depression, World War I, World War II. And the characters in my novel, they're victims as much as anyone was to the war and the Dust Bowl, the drought, the depression. And that plays into the story, but it doesn't control the story the way technically a history novel would have to be.
Mm-hmm. And that's rather interesting to talk about some of the events that tie in. You hear stories about World War I, the big cities, what's happening in New York, what happened in Chicago, and also in Detroit, Cleveland. Of course, you had like all the factories, just turning like, manufacturing cars and everything else into, war machinery, war equipment, and all that. And, World War I, what are some of the things that people in Oklahoma did, and what was what they did in Oklahoma during World War I? Some places, turned the car factories into, just building machinery, artillery, and all that. It's like, what did people manufacture in World War I in Oklahoma?
Oklahoma is where there's a large army base that manufactures cannon shells and large artillery shells, munitions at an army base here in Oklahoma. Oklahoma's always had a lot of Air Force bases and army bases. Because of the terrain as well as the weather, Oklahoma was chosen as one of the premier vicinities in America for Air Force bases where they trained many World War I and World War II pilots, as well as a lot of lady pilots who flew from Oklahoma to pick up airplanes at various airplane factories and fly them across the sea to the war effort, and then come back to America and pick up another airplane and fly it over also. So we've had a lot of aviators in Oklahoma. Got a long, rich aviation history here. But Oklahoma's part in World War I was primarily just giving up a lot of farm boys to go to the war. A lot of them didn't come back. Mm-hmm. Ironically, some of those died of that swine that flew from Spanish flu, rather than
the 1918, yes,
rather than from the battlefield. But my wife's father was in World War I. My ancestry, I had ancestors in World War II. I don't know that I had any in World War I, but my first Harwick grandfather came to America in 1732 to Philadelphia and fought in the Revolutionary War.
Interesting.
So my daughter is eligible to be a daughter of American Revolution by the requirements there.
Okay. All right. And that sounds like a really good history right there, too. You talked about the influenza of 1918. Let me try to fix here just a minute here. We're having some technical difficulties here on the Mike Wagner Show, and it's also powered by Sonic Web Studios. Okay, we're back on now with Mel James here, and you talked about the influenza of 1918, where they caught the Spanish flu, overseas and everything. There have been stories, talking about the influence of 1918 and how most cities handle it. How do people in Oklahoma handle the influence of 1918?
Well, fortunately, the population in Oklahoma was scattered. There weren't a lot of places of high density outside of the cities. A lot of the inhabitants of Oklahoma in that area of time were farmers and had not migrated a lot of people to the cities, where the flu epidemic didn't spread as badly in the country as it did in the cities. So, but still, Oklahoma lost a lot of its people. They had a lot of people trying to stay isolated to prevent catching the Spanish flu. Their soldiers came home from the war, and some of them had succumbed to the flu and survived. That flu was particularly dangerous for young adults, and oddly enough, there were a lot of young adults that contracted that flu and died from it. Mm-hmm. But Oklahoma was probably affected by that flu as much as the other wheat belt states: Kansas, Nebraska, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, agricultural states where people did not associate in large crowds that often anyway, and that helped them a lot, I think, to get through that. In my story, one of my main characters, his father, dies from the flu while he is fighting the war in Europe as a pilot, fighter pilot in World War I. He comes home to find that his father has died while he was overseas fighting the war. So that's one place where the 1918 flu epidemic fits into the storyline.
Okay. All right. And plus, we'll also talk about, going from that over to the oil booms you talked about earlier, and the bust many of us are experiencing as well. Got the Roaring 20s, Dirty 30s, Prohibition, Dust Bowl, all tied into the story. You also had some adventures as well, too, going across country. That's also tied into Terrorism on the Beat with Mel James. But first, listen to the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at SonicWebStudios.com for all your needs. Look at a professional website without breaking your budget. Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs at below the competition rate. Call today 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support@SonicWebStudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show. Get 20% off your first project. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level. Also, time to give an official shout out to our official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international war-ring author Mia Molson-Zia. If you love fast-paced mysteries, You'll love Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing is fast-paced and intriguing with an unforgettable twist. Takes place in 4 countries, 2 strangers, 1 target, where truth is an illusion and those you love will be the first go missing. It's available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing by Mia Molson-Zia has garnered great reviews and Eve 11 endorsed by Howard celebrities, including Joanna Cassidy, Forrest Riley, and many others. So grab your copy today for Goes Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon. Also, check out The Mike Wagner Show at themikewagnershow.com on over 40 podcast platforms, heard in over 100 countries, and also on hamiltonradio.net, Diamonds FM, Oldies Radio, and a few others. Take us with you on any mobile device. Subscribe to The Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. Follow The Mike Wagner Show on Instagram and Twitter today and TikTok. For great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com and check out The Mike Wagner Show podcast. And for more great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com/Mia Molson-Zia for great books, merchandise, and more. I'll support The Mike Wagner Show on Anchor FM, PayPal, and TheMikeWagnerShow.com. Make sure you give generously today. We're here with a retired engineer and manager in the aerospace industry and author of the book, Tares Among the Wheat, Volume 1 and 2, and upcoming Death in Tomorrow's Shadows, Melvin James here on The Mike Wagner Show. And continue on, Melvin, you mentioned about the oil booms, back in the 1920s, and it went bust. And, of course, up in North Dakota, where we also ventured in a little bit, we talked before we went on the show that, of course, the oil boom that's been the big news up in the Bakken on the western half of the state, getting into Canada. And, of course, you experienced the oil boom as well, too. And, tell us a bit about that. How does the oil boom in 1920 in Oklahoma compare to the oil booms, even today, or even like back in the 80s around Texas and Louisiana?
I think the oil boom, Texas and Oklahoma as well, in the 1920s was a lot more hectic and a lot more involved with swarms of people coming from all over the United States to work in the oil industry. There were towns that went up overnight when oil was struck in the area. And we have photographs around here taken in the 1920s where the oil rigs were put up and they look like tall trees in the forest, one after another as far as you can see. They actually did not want to take the time to take an oil derrick down, move it, and reassemble it. They just left it where it was and put up another one a few feet away. And so there were areas that were just crowded with oil derricks and oil pumps working under those. If anyone's seen the movie Tulsa that was produced back in the 30s or 40s, that gives an idea of what it was like around here during that time. There weren't any environmental protections back then in the 20s, and so the oil business was not very careful about spills of salt water. Most of the oil wells that are drilled, the oil is found underground with oceans of salt water that they pump out with the oil and dispose of. So there was a lot of damage to the land, but it came back after another 50 years or so, recovered from all those spills of oil and salt water. And the creeks and the streams that had the fish killed by the salt water and oil, they reestablished themselves. So the oil boom in the 1920s in Oklahoma was rough and tumble, lawless. There was lots of crime in those towns that sprung up overnight. One town not far from where I live now, they used to say that there was a murder every night.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a kid, that was exceptional. But today, I'm afraid that in the cities, at least, there is virtually, again, a murder almost every night. But,
especially in social media, too. My goodness, seems like a murder every second since social media entered. Seems like it's ramped up every second, yeah.
But that was appalling. My own father worked in that oil industry when he was a young man. He bought a motorcycle, a Harley-Davidson motorcycle, about 1926 or 28 in that time frame, and drove it to Border, Texas, where he worked welding onto the oil tanks that held the oil. And he actually got partially blinded because they were working so fast and so carelessly that one welder would be next to another one.
Oh, my goodness.
If the guy welding next to you did not shout that he was going to make an electronic arc, so you could turn your head away or whatever, then you were apt to get your eyes blinded. So he went through that, came back out of that oil industry to get back into farming, which is what he grew up into.
Mm-hmm.
So that oil industry has been a part of my life. In this area, there are still pumping oil wells where I live. I've leased my land and had a interest in an oil well from time to time here.
Mm-hmm.
But fracking has been used here, and there's been a second recovery of oil through fracking. It's not as robust as it is in the Dakotas in reclaiming oil from fracking in this area.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, you mentioned something about North Dakota as well too. You went from Texas to North Dakota, and maybe a little bit about the journey, going from south up the north as well too. Since we're on the subject of North Dakota.
Yes. As myself, as a child and on up as a teenager, I and my brothers both worked with my father to thrash grain. We'd thrash our own grain here in Oklahoma, wheat mostly, sometimes barley and oats. Then we'd go to Kansas where we thrashed grain for the same wheat farmer there for 20 years running.
Wow.
And then Alliance, Nebraska, we thrashed grain there for farmers that we'd thrashed grain for almost that long, 20 years running.
Mm-hmm.
Then when we finished in Nebraska, it was hit and miss for South Dakota and North Dakota. But many a time I would get back to Oklahoma after school had already started, because we'd cut grain all the way up into the 1st of September in North Dakota.
Mm-hmm.
And there it was much different than it was in the more southern states. To get the grain to ripen there in North Dakota, the wheat is actually mowed and windrowed, put into rows. So the combines then pick up the windrows the way a hay baler would pick up rows of hay, rather than cut it with the sickle, because it has to be mowed and put into windrows so it will dry out enough to thrash it.
Okay.
Because it's too cool up there by the time September comes usually.
Okay. I see that one makes sense as well, too. And then later on, you went from Massachusetts to Arkansas. You did some car repair. You also decoded top secret Soviet telemetry by hand in Aleutian Islands. And you also evaluated computerized precision machinery in Japan. You also picked lemons by hand in California. That had to be fun.
Yes. That was before I went to college. I was right out of high school. Didn't have anything to do, and that urge to go to California and see if I could strike gold there, so to speak, overwhelmed me. I was 17.
Mm-hmm.
I went all the way to California, and the only job I found was picking lemons at 60 cents a bushel.
Wow.
And I found out real quick that lemon trees have thorns that are about 3 inches long, 2 to 3 inches. And it will tear your shirt up in 4 hours of work if you really try to pick lemons, as well as scratch up your arms. But that, I think, was a good incentive for me to come back home and work harder to get through college.
Mm-hmm.
But talking about decoding encrypted data, that gets into my next novel that I'm about halfway through with, Death in Tomorrow's Shadow. It takes place in a fictitious electronic surveillance base in Alaska, in the Arctic Circle, is where the murder takes place. And again, I'm going back to what my professor always told me: write what you know about. I spent a year there in the Arctic Circle working in electronics at a electronic surveillance base, where we actually intercepted every electronic signal from radar to very low frequencies and everything in between of all modulations, and used those to screen for intelligence that we could gather from those signals. So that story that I'm writing now is roughly based on that experience, but necessarily because a lot of that was sensitive information, sensitive data, I am writing fictitiously, writing with only that in the background, without much detail of that particular electronic surveillance work.
Mm-hmm. And of course, that's come up in the second book, Death in Tomorrow's Shadows, as well too. And
Yes.
and just to cover up some of the other errors as well too, we'll touch base more with Mel James and more about Tares Among the Wheat, and also Death in Tomorrow's Shadows and what's coming up for Arthur Mel James. You listen to the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at SonicWebStudios.com for all your needs. Also brought to you by our official sponsor, the Mike Wagner Show, international war-ring author Mia Molson-Zia Missing, available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. We'll be back with author Melvin James of Tares Among the Wheat, Volumes 1 and 2, and the upcoming Death in Tomorrow's Shadows after this time out.
The Mike Wagner Show is powered by Sonic Web Studios. If you're looking to start or upgrade your online presence, visit www.sonicwebstudios.com for all of your online needs. Call 1-800-303-3960 or visit us online at www.sonicwebstudios.com to get started today. Mention the Mike Wagner Show and get 20% off your project. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level.
Hey everybody, my name is Forbes Riley, and I'm an American actress and a TV host. And I was delighted when I got my copy of Missing, which is Extraordinary Relation of Ordinary People based on a real life relationship. It's well written. It's amazing. You know, it talks about a man who has lost his wife and his daughter, and it's very well done. I'm going to highly recommend that you go get your copy of Missing. It is a powerful, exciting read. Mr. Mian Moshe Zia. He is the author of Missing. And I want to give a big shout out and a kiss all the way halfway around the world to my dear friend. Check him out at Mia's website. It's called www.miamotionzea.com. Missing, available on Amazon. Again, I'm Forbes Riley, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Hey, this is Ray Powers, and boy, are you in luck. Right place, right time. Tuned in to the Mike Wagner Show. You heard me.
We're back with author Melvin James of Tares Among the Wheat here on the Mike Wagner Show, and the upcoming novel Death in Tomorrow's Shadows. And just to get a couple of things as well too, and going back a little bit to about Tares Among the Wheat, and so the oil boom as well is also tied into the Roaring '20s, also Dirty '30s, Prohibition, and the Dust Bowl. It seems to all combine together, especially in that story. And of course, you hear about those like in the big cities, but Oklahoma, it's like, is it any different, or maybe just a bit more varied?
Well, definitely Oklahoma was the centerpiece for the Dust Bowl. And Oklahoma also had a very colorful history in the days of Prohibition, since Oklahoma was one of the very last states, not until the 1970s, 60s,
wow,
to allow hard liquor. They did allow beer, and for all the time from the 1930s clear up to 1960s, 35-year period, the only beer you could buy in Oklahoma was 3.2%.
Oh, my goodness.
And so during that time, there was a number of illegal stills, whiskey stills, and bootleggers who would run the whiskey from those stills. There were also bootleggers that just drove to Kansas, bought whiskey, and brought it back to Oklahoma and resold it for a profit. It's kind of interesting. My father was a mechanic during the 30s and 40s. He did mechanic work for Chrysler, Plymouth, while the wheat was growing. Wheat farmers, they have to work really hard to plant the wheat, and then the wheat just grows all winter, and then they have to work hard to harvest the wheat and prepare the ground. But all winter, most of them have something else they do, and my father was no different. He was an automobile mechanic, and he was friends with a couple of fellows who were bootleggers, who drove the cars to get whiskey here or there and then resell it. And the people that were the bootleggers were actually just family men, fathers who had big families that were hungry and needed fed. Mm-hmm. And they kind of had an honor to them. They wouldn't sell whiskey to youngsters, and they wouldn't sell bad whiskey. There was some stills that were making bad whiskey. If they used lead in the solder of their pipes of the still, then the lead would get into the whiskey and cause a lot of health problems. Oh, but anyway, one of his friends, who was just an average guy making a living for his family, came to him and told him that the sheriff had almost caught him, and he wanted him to soup up his old car. And so, as a mechanic, he souped it up. He said, not 3 days later, the sheriff showed up and told him that guy got away from him again, and he wanted him to soup up the sheriff's squad car, which he did. And so he had an extra little bit of work there, tuning up the sheriff's car and then the bootlegger's car for a while.
Oh my goodness!
So that's kind of the colorful background that fits into some of the backdrop of Tares Among the Wheat. Oklahoma had a lot of that kind of activity. Oklahoma was unique for the center of the Dust Bowl, although lots of the Dust Bowl filtered into Texas, Kansas, and Colorado. The Grapes of Wrath was written about the Okies, so I think there's more colorful history in Oklahoma than any other state along that era, from the mid-19th century to the mid-20th century, because we did go through the Dust Bowl and all the oil booms and the oil busts, all of those things, plus merging in with the Native American tribes that are here and working relations with them. There's a movie coming out, another movie coming out, Killers of the Flower Moon, that is about the Oklahoma Native Americans. It's going to be a big movie. There's been a number of books and movies written about that colorful history that we have, mixing in with Native Americans. And my neighbors are Native Americans. I've worked with and grown up and went to school with Native Americans, and I really love my Native American neighbors and friends. I've included in my novel some characters that are Native American and some legends that are Native American, and tried to write about those respectfully and with dignity, because our Native Americans are dignified and respectable and very hardworking and earnest, good citizens. Hollywood has not always portrayed them that way, but I think that's turning around. But that's part of Oklahoma's heritage and Oklahoma's history and the culture of this state that I tried to weave into the story. The long storyline also has legends and curses that go all the way back to Ireland that are alleged in the story. It's got some mysticism in it. One of the main characters meets a gypsy woman in Kentucky, and incidentally, she happens to meet up with him again later in Louisiana, and she carries him in her gypsy wagon called a Vardo from Louisiana to Oklahoma for the land run. And that's in the story.
Wow, that is interesting. And I was going to get that part. You have been to Ireland. You also been to Israel, Czech Republic, Canada, Japan, and Spain, Hungary, traveling overseas, tying those stories. And you also went to school. You also went to work. And, tell us a bit about the ventures as well, too.
Oh, yes. I've traveled a lot with my jobs as well as since I retired, just for the sake of seeing other countries and with my wife. I went to Japan with a corporation that I worked for that was in the aerospace defense to look at and critique and try to analyze multi-million-dollar machinery that we were purchasing to make aircraft parts with. It's a modern computer-controlled, numerically controlled machinery that with lots of precision and lots of complication in the way it works. So that took me to Japan. That was an interesting trip. The military took me to the Aleutian Islands, where I was engaged there in the electronics surveillance business. Then I had a number of business trips with Boeing across the United States and over to Scotland. There's a General Electric aircraft engine overhaul facility in Scotland. So we had another engine overhaul facility that was running out of capacity, and so we I and two of my engineers went to Scotland to spend a number of days there validating and checking out that aircraft engine facility to make sure it would meet all the requirements of the Air Force as well as the FAA and so forth. So I've had a number of travels in that nature, but most of my travel, I'd have to say, was probably for tourism for my wife and myself, just for the enjoyment of it. We just love foreign travel.
And it sounds like you did a really good job of it. Also tied in with Terrorism on the Wheat, Volume 1 and 2, and upcoming Death in Tomorrow's Shadows. And where can we find your books at, Mel?
Everyone sells my book. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. It's sold around the world. You can buy it from Flipkart in India, in Germany, or I should say Netherlands. There's a book company there that sells my novel. Let's see, that's in Denmark, it's Saxo is the name of the book company. In France, Glose, Glose, I'm sure they pronounce that differently. They sell my novel. In Scandinavian countries, Sweden, Finland, Norway, Adlibris sells my novel. You can buy it as a hardcover book, a paperback book, or a ebook. As an ebook, you can buy it from Apple, Google Play, or Kindle. Even Walmart sells my book, as well as IndieBound, the independent bookstore. So about anywhere you look online, very few bookstores have it on the shelf, but you can get it from any bookstore online. Or if someone's not very adept at going online to buy things, I always tell my interested potential readers, just go to your local library. Your librarians are always pleased to help you order a book online. They usually have computers right there at the library. Mm-hmm. Or you can go to your bookstore, the big bookstores like Amazon or Barnes and Noble, or Books A Million, I should say, and those people there will help you order the book online. You can deliver it to your house or however you want that done.
I will certainly do so. It is amazing. We're with Melvin James of Terrorism on the Wheat, Volume 1 and 2, upcoming Death in Tomorrow's Shadows on the Mike Wagner Show. And just a few more things, Mel. What else can we expect from you in 2022 and beyond, or possibly 2023?
Well, I'm going to finish my my mystery novel, which is a detective murder mystery. I want to finish that by Christmas is my goal. Then after that, I'm setting up that detective novel in case it does catch on with the reader public. Then I will have follow-on novels of the same detective. So I've created a new detective character. He's an odd character. I think it's essential to get past all of the normal run-of-the-mill detective stories, and if that catches on, then I'll probably write a series of those detective novels. The epic 2-volume Tares Among the Wheat, I don't think I'll write another one of those. It was what I had stored up in me, I think, for my whole career, waiting to write that epic novel, the Great American Novel, and that's over with. I think I'll be writing shorter novels now. However, that novel, for a 2-volume novel, is done very well in reviews. It's a 4.9 average ratings on Barnes & Noble as well as Amazon. So I'm getting good reviews with that. It's not your ordinary book. It's the kind of book you'd want to buy if you have a flight to Australia, or if you're going to spend a lot of time on the beach, or you live in some place like North Dakota, Bismarck, and you're going to be snowed in for 3 or 4 months, and then that's the kind of novel you want. It will entertain you, and I like to think it will teach you a lot. I knew a lot about the history, but I also did a lot of research to make sure that everything was accurate. So the novel is self-teaching on a lot of history in that respect.
And certainly very interesting. I'll make it a point when we get about 3-4 feet of snow, we'll certainly cuddle up to that book. And who do you consider biggest influence in your career?
Now, my career in aerospace,
give me
my
anything.
biggest influence in my career had to have been when I was working my way through college. I could not maintain enough credit hours engagement at the same time I was working 40, 50 hours a week labor jobs. So I dropped one class, and it was during the height of the Vietnam War, and I got drafted very quickly. And I had already completed almost a year in pre-engineering classes, so I had some knowledge in me. They ran me through the battery of tests, and they pulled me out of the line from going to the jungles with a rifle, and said if I'd sign up for 4 years, they would give me some special training. And I signed up for that. So they taught me all the electronics. I went to school for 2.5 years out of a 4-year enlistment, including 8 months at the National Security Agency in Maryland. And they taught me lots about cryptographic decoding, electronic intelligence decoding, demultiplexing of signals. So that got me interested in electrical engineering, and the two of those got me interested into aerospace defense contracting. And so that affected my career more than anything.
That is very interesting, and I love it. And what's the best advice you can give to anybody at this point?
I would say if you've always had an urge to write, just go ahead and do it. Try it. Write what you know about. Don't worry about the grammar and the English and all of that. Some editor will find a person to review it. So just write the story. Use your own language. That's what gives, I think, stories interest. And let the grammarian figure out the English and all of that sort of thing. I had to argue with my grammarian a little bit because some of the bad language I used, and when I say bad, I'm not talking about vulgar, I'm just talking about poor grammar, poor English, was necessary because it was part of the character.
Mm-hmm.
So if the grammarian, the person reviewing your book, editing it, is not too much into the story, they might just be looking at sentence structure without thinking about what the story's going on about. But my advice would be just that. Write what you know. Write it in your own words. Don't kill a lot of time worrying about sentence structure. A good editor will work through all of that. They're really looking for stories that have originality, that are genuine, that have color to them, that have character to them.
And that's a very good point. And tell that grammarian to go live in Oklahoma for a while. Tell him that.
That's a good point.
Yeah, tell him what it's like. We're here with author Melvin James of Tares Among the Wheat, Volume 1 and 2, upcoming novel, Death in Tomorrow's Shadows on the Mike Wagner Show. Melvin, very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely fantastic. Learned a lot from you. Looking forward to having you again soon. Just keep us up to date. Keep in touch. Love to have you back. Once again, tell us about your upcoming projects. What's your website? How do people contact you? Or can people purchase or check out your books?
Okay, I have a website. It's fairly easy. And from that website, they can go to my Facebook page, Twitter. They can go to my book pages. They can go to my booksellers. And that website is HTTPS. And the S, I remind people, means it's a secure site. // And the important part, that's all you really need to put into your web browser, is www.h-melvin, melvin-james.com. So it's h-melvin-james.com.
All right. We'll certainly check that out. Once again, Mel, a very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely amazing. Looking forward to having you again soon. Make sure you keep us up to date. Keep in touch. Love to have you back. We wish you all the best. And Mel, you've got a great future ahead of you.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Mike. You have a good evening.
The Mike Wagner Show is powered by Sonic Web Studios. If you're looking to start or upgrade your online presence, visit www.sonicwebstudios.com for all of your online needs. Call 1-800-303-3960 or visit us online at www.sonicwebstudios.com to get started today. Mention the Mike Wagner Show and get 20% off your project. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level.
Hey everybody, my name is Forbes Riley, and I'm an American actress and a TV host. And I was delighted when I got my copy of Missing, which is Extraordinary Relation of Ordinary People based on a real life relationship. It's well written. It's amazing. You know, it talks about a man who has lost his wife and his daughter, and it's very well done. I'm going to highly recommend that you go get your copy of Missing. It is a powerful, exciting read. Mr. Mian Moshe Zia. He is the author of Missing. And I want to give a big shout out and a kiss all the way halfway around the world to my dear friend. Check him out at Mia's website. It's called www.miamoshenzea.com. Missing, available on Amazon. Again, I'm Forbes Riley, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to The Mike Wagner Show. Brought to you by international award-winning author Mia Mohsen-Zia of Missing, and powered by Sonic Web Studios. Be sure to join us again on over 40 podcast platforms, and of course on the MikeWagnerShow.com, HamiltonRadio.net, and Diamonds FM. Don't forget to support our program with a generous donation at the MikeWagnerShow.com. Thanks for listening.